Market Musings podcast with Fairbairn and Russell. Hello and welcome to the Market Musings podcast, where joining us today, Scott Kaintz, the CEO of Corcel PLC, is joining us. Of course, we did speak just briefly earlier in the week, didn't we, Scott, on the recent news, but we said we were going to do a longer format and sort of get a bit more into the nitty-gritty. But thank you for joining us. How are you?
Oh, doing well. Thank you. Good to be here once again this week.
Indeed. And Kenny joining us from a wet, windy, cold Scotland.
Yeah, hi Scots. Yeah, great to speak to you again. Yeah,
Indeed.
I must have, I'm not in my usual location. I'm in the deepest, darkest. Well, it's Mull of Kintyre. You may remember the song that Paul McCartney done. So I'm not too far from that beach, but it's pretty damn miserable today. So yeah, but we'll just go on with it. I'm nice and warm inside.
Good. Well, it's good to be warm inside when it's freezing outside. So, well, let's talk then about this deal, Scott, because I mean, it seems like maybe it's come, out of nowhere. There was no kind of hint this might be coming, but it's been probably quite a long time in the works, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking to this group. Again, I've kind of met the principals through London Business School again, which has been a kind of useful one of the uses of the old MBA, which is nice to see. But I met these guys a while ago, and we've been talking about different ways to work together, including offtake has been one of our main focuses. Obviously, getting an off-taker in bed with these assets is the best way to sort of take them forward. And so we put an MOU out earlier this year, which was a kind of theoretical construct of they would like a certain amount of offtake and we would like to provide it. And now let's work together on how we kind of set that structure up. And what's happened is, a lot of talking, a lot of COVID restrictions on traveling in Asia, which have slowed things down. And we sort of settled on the idea of, creating a Singapore listing, of them injecting some of their battery metal assets, our injecting ours, and then listing it out there in Asia, which we felt would both meet their offtake needs while improving the situation of Corcel investors. Obviously, it diversifies some of our P&G risk. It gives investors access to lithium, which is probably the hottest battery metal in the market at the moment. And frankly, at the end of the day, it virtually ensures that these assets will go forward, right? I mean, I say that all the time with the explorers. It's great to have stuff in the ground, and we can talk about how many billion tons and how many billions it's worth theoretically. But let's remember, if you don't have a viable way forward with somebody who wants that, that offtake, then frankly, it's actually not worth all that much. And so this was really about marrying those two things together.
Okay. Well, before we dive a bit more into the detail of the deal here, the joint venture, I wonder if we can just get maybe a state of play or the current status of both Mambare and Wowo Gap.
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. I think it's helpful to kind of understand the context a little bit. I mean, Mambare has been pursuing a mining lease now for 18 months or so, quite a while. And the reality is it might come tomorrow or it might come next month. You just don't know at the end of the day. And Wowo Gap has been exploring DSO options. We updated the JORC earlier this year, and we did a gap analysis, and we're looking on ways to make sure that we have the right tonnage needed to go ahead and export raw ore to Asia. So that's been an ongoing process. Both these projects have an ongoing burn. They both cost money, to sit here and even do relatively small amounts of work on the ground. And I think in the background, an important point is that the political situation, there were elections in PNG out in August, has also gotten a little more convoluted. There's been some noise, from senior government officials about not as much support for DSO. I mean, that's it's not clear, to be totally honest with you, how strong that is. It could be that Mambare gets through. It could be that Wowo Gap might not get through, a year from now, or it's just not clear. But the sort of general sentiment has been that it might be a little bit harder to do DSO. And I'll just remind everybody that DSO is a $35 million CapEx. I mean, that's something that's kind of feasible, right? A name company could potentially put that together with debt and equity. If you're talking about HPAL, you're talking about billions. Absolutely billions, right? And so at that point, Corcel has to say, well, could we go that route, or how do we do this? And so, on a practical basis, as I kind of said a few minutes ago, you've got to tie the assets to the people that want the metals. And in this case, it's a big cathode plant in China and the underlying backers of that project. So, that's kind of the stage of it. We have to decide how to take these forward, how to play our hand. I'd say the market to some extent, for better or for worse, has kind of spoken, right? I mean, they're not really valuing these assets in Corcel. And I don't know, we might do better if we were on the ASX. It's hard to say. And and as a final point, traders haven't been very happy, right? These assets don't throw off constant news flow that, we certainly understand that to some extent retail traders want to see. We're in a permitting stage that, we're not drilling. And I think that's kind of hurt us as a bit of a trading share. I mean, not to say that's why we exist. We're here to create long-term net asset value, but it's also helpful, of course, if you get people excited with kind of ongoing news. And these projects have been at that kind of final permitting stage where you might say it's a little bit industrial, a little bit boring relative to, to some of our peer group, I guess. So all those things are kind of percolating. I'm just trying to set the stage a little bit about, where we're at, where we want to take it. Those things percolating in the background. And that's kind of why we came to the agreement we have. We think it's by far the best deal, given the realities out there and the potential upside of partnering with NPC.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, well, why Singapore, Scott? I mean, I know there's a massive financial market and stock exchange over there. Is it just simply because the JV partners are Chinese? Is that the main reason?
Yeah, I think so. They've suggested that. I wouldn't say we're beholden to Singapore. We're calling it a Singapore JV. It's going to be based there. It's called IBM, a great name, obviously, that we're forming integrated battery metals. It could end up on the ASX. I wouldn't rule that out. I mean, this is all to be decided once the thing is put together and we start that formal listing process. But for now, the plan is Singapore. And yeah, I think our partners see Singapore as a growing exchange, in the commodity space there, located in the center of Asia, kind of where it needs to be. Again, pointing out that the PNG assets, as a pure play here in London, for whatever reason, we just don't seem to be getting people's attention, and I don't know if that's because it's a little bit far away. I mean, we certainly all know that the ASX and Australian investors have a special relationship with PNG that probably London investors don't have, right? So Singapore, I think, would also be obviously in the same region, and we felt after discussions with our partners that the upside and the value, the valuation uplift is likely to be significant. I mean, I think listing these same assets with NPC as a backer in Asia, I mean, you can imagine, the kind of numbers we're talking about here, they're going to be pretty big.
Yeah, I mean, I know you sort of touched earlier on, on the joint venture partner, they've obviously got a plant in China. Can you maybe expand on that? Just tell us a bit more about them.
Yeah,
as much as you can.
Yeah, sure. No, they've got a cathode plant that's producing cathode. They've had some supply issues during COVID, and they've got three big backers. One is the Sentient Group, which is a big private equity fund. The second is a titanium pigment manufacturer in China, and the third is called Cosmo AM&T, which you can look up as a multi-billion-dollar cathode manufacturer in Korea. So, as I said on the small interview we did the other day, these are big partners, right? I mean, these are big industrial users of battery metals, and again, it's a little frustrating. We don't seem to be getting quite full credit for having finally consummated a relationship with them, but they're joining our board. They're putting an initial small stake into our business, but it's pretty clear that the tie-up is now real and permanent, right? I mean, that's moving forward. So we've been sort of trying to seduce them for a while, and I think we've now succeeded in the format that we announced this week.
Okay. Yeah. So it's fair to say the new cornerstone investor would be the joint venture partner, Scott, just to clarify that.
Correct. So the money that went in the other day is NPC. They will nominate a board member, which has to go through the usual nomad checks. He's already been identified. He's the individual I mentioned earlier, and that process will play out. But yeah, he will join the board, and obviously, once he's fully inside on everything we're up to, our intention is to discuss the way forward with him, and what we do with the PLC and what we do with IBM. And I guess it probably is worth saying that on the IBM side, we're going to maintain a 50% interest there. It's carried. We have a board seat, and we're going to be involved. I mean, it's not a takeover. I mean, they're vending in their Argentinian assets. We're vending in our nickel assets, and we're going to be pretty involved with the nickel and its ongoing development, right? And exactly where that balance falls, we need to work out. I mean, it may be that we are more involved at the beginning, and that as IBM, we put in place its management team and ultimate plan out there, that then we step away a little bit. But that's a process. But it is very much, and they are expecting us to show up to the management committee meetings, to be involved, to help guide IBM forward. It's not a situation where they're going to be doing all that lifting.
Okay.
Yep. Understand. Sorry, Mark, I interrupted you.
No, I was just going to say that you mentioned, Scott, sort of seducing these guys for a while, and yesterday or whenever it was earlier in the week when we did that interview, you said these are the type of people we want to be working with as a junior mining company. But so if this has been, you obviously think it's a very good deal for the company, for shareholders to take this forward. But in terms of valuing Corcel's projects, then, I mean, there was no cash in this deal. There's a lot of assets being given away. I mean, obviously you have got a lithium play coming in as part of that. So, I mean, can you elaborate a little bit more on the structure of the deal and why it's it was done that way and why it's in the best interest of shareholders?
Sure. No, I think this is the sort of standard AIM strategy, right? I mean, you develop an asset, gather assets together, do the work you can, and then ultimately bring in the big boys in some form. Again, as I kind of mentioned earlier, I think if we were a 100 million pound company, then maybe we would look at taking these things forward on our own. But, given the issues I mentioned earlier about potentially having to look at HPAL and other multi-billion, dollar options, we think this is the way to go. So we don't see this as giving away anything. I mean, we see this as a marriage, right? I mean, what we're doing is pulling people closer to us. I mean, close enough that they're joining our board, right? So, I mean, it's pretty obvious that they're going to have then an ongoing financial and, sort of attention span stake in our business and how we take it forward. So, yeah, we wanted to add lithium for a long time. I've talked about that repeatedly. Lithium projects are extremely expensive, extremely hyped at the moment. Just as a sort of talking about the needs to meet EV demand and battery metals around the world. And so we felt that the ability to diversify away from, a particular type of PNG risk, where WOWO, Gap, and Mambari are probably in the same boat there, makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I don't think we're giving away anything. I mean, again, as I said earlier, metals in the ground that aren't going to be dug up anytime soon aren't worth much, and unless they are going to be dug up and sold, right? And bringing in a group like this ensures that they will be, or that the better way to say it probably is that IBM will now have a portfolio of assets. Corcel will be exposed to all of it, and whatever IBM decides to do, Corcel will benefit from. Right. So again, you're sort of diversifying away your risk from one mining lease application, from one type of DSO operation in PNG at this point to a much broader, play or bet on the battery metal space, which I think we all think, and I think most of the investors we talk to think is a good one, a great place to be.
Yeah.
And go on, Kenny.
I'm just looking through some of the terms of RNS, and obviously there's a royalty in there for WOWO Gap as well, Scott, which is always nice to have up your sleeve, because that's Correct. A sellable asset as well.
That's right. Yes. You can sell that. There's all sorts of things you can do, and that is a gross revenue royalty, which is the best kind, right? So you're making money there, irrespective of whether the underlying operation is making any money. And we all know that you can play games with profitability and all the rest. So no, we were adamant that we picked up WOWO for relatively little. We've done a bit of work on it here, and we now think, as I said, that the partnership with NPC is the way to take it forward. Getting a royalty on that is outstanding, and and the royalty being 1.5% is pretty decent. We also, of course, get the carried interest, I think I mentioned earlier, which means that we don't have to eat the ongoing burn of IBM, including WOWO Gap, the lithium asset, and Mambari. So, again, people seem to forget, there's an ongoing, there's cash calls every month, right? I mean, there are bills that have to be paid, staff has to be paid, filings have to be done, work is ongoing. So we're sort of off the hook on that for a while, which I think gives us a chance to sort of better integrate with NPC and decide how to take Corcel forward, while, as I mentioned earlier, leaving the exposure to, I think, the reason that most people invested in Corcel to begin with.
Yep. And I assume IBM would be in a position to do potentially further acquisitions if they've got that kind of firepower behind them.
Correct. I mean, the plan is to inject assets, and I would say, we can talk about our new acquisition or potential acquisition here in Mount Weld here shortly. Those could come from all sides, right? I mean, it would not surprise me that Corcel ends up injecting some other things over time, but certainly you would expect the Sentient Group and the NPC Group more broadly, given their interest in battery metals, to inject some other things. So this will be bulked up to the right size before listing, and that's something that we'll sort of determine with NPC over the coming months. But the plan would be to list as soon as possible. I mean, it's hard to put a hard timeline on that right now, but I think next year is not out of the question, assuming we can, wrap up this deal here in the near term.
Excellent. Sorry, Mark, I keep interrupting you.
No, it's okay. It's a good conversation. And with the joint venture, Scott, will Corcel still have, not necessarily control, but will you still have a very active interest in the projects going forward?
That's certainly the plan. As I said earlier, especially on WoWo Gap, which we run on a daily basis. I mean, don't forget with Mambare, we run that with our partner, our Australian partner, BMA. So we're not as involved in the day-to-day. But I would expect us to be involved with WoWo Gap. Our team is currently running it. Now that team is going to carry over here. And, the structure being set up is a pretty standard joint venture agreement where, the parties meet, cash call each other, or cash call the larger group and fund the business. And so, as I said, we're off the hook on the cash calls for a while, but we're going to be very engaged on the actual day-to-day management and on putting the right, team together in Asia to ultimately list that business. So yeah, if I was as a Corcel shareholder today, like I said, I'd be pretty excited that I not only have access to the nickel and cobalt, but the Argentinian lithium, which is a really exciting salt brine deposit. These are the type of deposits that provide most of the world's lithium at this point, and going to be in ever greater demand.
Will it be the joint venture partner that sort of draws up the next plans, let's say, with exploration of these assets and proving them up?
Not necessarily.
No.
Again, our technical people are kind of running the PNG assets at this point. I'm not implying that we would be as directly involved in the Argentinian development at this stage, but I think in PNG that's an open discussion. I think our technical people, our existing management, with some of the mining expertise coming from the Sentient Group, will decide how to take these forward. Which one do we focus on? What do we do next, and so forth. And I would point out that our partner, battery metals on the Mambare project, could ultimately join forces in the same arrangement as well. I mean, obviously, we couldn't have a whole lot of discussions with them until this structure was created, but it may well prove that, or it may well end up that 100% of Mambare goes into this structure.
Okay. And what about the UK listing? Is that affected at all by this deal?
But it's not affected directly. Like I said, we're gonna continue to be involved on a practical basis. But I think over the midterm, yes, it does sort of open Corcel up to potentially, focus on some other things. I mean, it might be that IBM becomes a bit of just an investment at some stage. Again, we would have that sort of ongoing management committee, interface. But it might be that we are freed up to do some other things. And I would point you to NPC. NPC has some pretty exciting cathode technology. I mean, some of that originally comes from that Korean partner. There has been an effort to, start to look to produce battery parts, cathodes, anodes, and full batteries in Europe, and in the United States to actually produce a little closer to some of the end users of these batteries, which would be the EV market and other things like that. So, our partners bring with them tech that might be, you might argue, is applicable to factories and production here in Europe. So, that's something we've sort of discussed at a high level. As I said earlier, Sentient is a multi-billion-dollar mining fund, has access to a lot of projects on the mining side as well. So, I would expect us to continue to look at doing things in that space as well. Okay. But the point is that the NPC marriage of sorts allows us to consider doing things here with the UK listing that probably wasn't on the table just last week.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Well, there'll be plenty of news flow, I imagine, to come going forward. Then we'll start to see some acceleration of these projects now.
That's certainly the plan. As I said, I think it's been a little frustrating over the COVID period of trying to pursue DSO with these two plans. The PNG government and MRA work to their own tune. I don't think COVID has helped speed that up any. And so, I think, the key there is not to be as beholden to, as I said, to that one particular, set of circumstances. And so with NPC joining our board, with the three main shareholders backing us, we can potentially look at doing some interesting things. I guess the other one I would throw out there is don't forget about our FGS side of the business. I can say that NPC has been perked up, by that side of the business. I mean, access to some of the grid level industrial batteries production in China is one thing that they may potentially offer us. And so when it comes to doing something, maybe you call it a revised or bolstered strategy here in the UK, it may well be that our existing FGS business provides a real good foundation for doing some exciting things together.
Yeah. And obviously sticking with the EV thing or battery metals, obviously today you announced an option for a rare earth project in Western Australia. And obviously, for those who don't know, rare earths, it's the EV motors that they're particularly used in.
Yeah,
So
that's right. That's right.
You
They
can
have
evolve
defense
it.
applications. I mean, it's probably one of
Yeah,
the hottest areas in the world at the moment, especially with the war in Ukraine, right? I mean, they go into missiles and all sorts of strategic, I think they're considered strategic minerals, right? So,
yeah,
yeah, we're pretty excited. This is the team we're partnering with here that built up Wishbone Gold, you might have heard of. I mean, they've
yep,
gone through some good runs. Yeah, we've been very impressed with them technically. They've produced. We now have an option over what are 3 to 4 targets, which straddle effectively one of the world's largest producers of rare earth elements. $7 billion company, Linus Rare Earths, the Mount Weld project. My understanding is that project has gone under a $500 million upgrade to increase production by 50%, which just shows you how in demand these assets are. And rumor has it that it's like some 90% of the world's niobium is coming from this plant at the moment. I'm not sure we've been able to sort of find a hard stat on that, but it's a big operation. I was looking it up before we jumped on this interview, and it's a 51-meter deep pit, 3 kilometers diameter or something. It's big.
yeah,
And we're right outside it, basically. And that's a typical strategy, obviously, for junior miners. It's just sort of the nearology play. But I think the reality is you can't really see these guys tolerating a rival producer popping up next door, right? So I think there's if this works out the way we kind of hope it will, there's a deal to be done there. So our plan is to we actually should be able to do some reprocessing of some of the data during the DD phase. That's supposed to last, I think the plan is about 45 days or so to get through everything and make sure everything's in order. And then obviously there'll be further announcements on how we take things from here. But yeah, when we talk about where Corcel goes from here, I think rare earth elements could play a very big role in it. And I think we are, as I mentioned earlier, quite excited to see where this one goes.
yeah. It's quite strange. I mean, it's been a very quiet summer, Bill, for most explorers, and 2 RNSs in as many days. It's almost like buses. There's none, and then all of a sudden there's 3. So
yeah, we got a lot of comments of obviously retail investors always want news flow, and we some of these things just take a long time. I mean, arranging the parts to get NPC across the line was a long it was a long conversation, and it was impacted by travel, as I mentioned, where our partner that used basically the Sentient Group had to go visit the other parts of the cathode plant and sort of work on how are we going to do this and what are they going to do, and what it takes time. So yeah, we certainly recognize that there's been a quiet period there throughout the end of the summer, and I think you now see that we're kind of full steam ahead on this, and the share price perked up a bit today, which is good to see. So hopefully people think we're doing the right thing. Yep. I will make one more comment about Mount Weld. It's kind of interesting. Apparently, that tenement has been owned by one family for like 25 plus years. So what's kind of interesting about it is that this is the first time that tenement really has been shown to the public markets. And a lot of times when junior companies pick things up, it's sort of past the tin a little bit, right? You get sort of the past the tin and never open it, I guess is the joke. But this really is a new thing, and I think that's kind of why it why it got us excited. I think it's
if it's been held for 25 years as well, they will have spent some money on it, because my experience in Western Australia, I think it's every 5 years you reapply for a granted license.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to have your minimum spend commitments every year, or you don't get the grant again. So they've obviously had to put some money in the ground to keep it in good standing. So there should be plenty of data for you guys to do your DD on, etc.
Yeah, no, I think we think it's a good launching point to to potentially start to chart the pathway forward. And I think if this works, there should be some other opportunities kind of in a similar vein coming down the pike. So,
yeah. And it's interesting because if you just sort of step back to projects and almost like a helicopter view of Corcel, you look at the market cap, it's tiny. It's like
ridiculous. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's
it's not even a listing. It's not even the value of any listing at the moment.
Correct.
All this potential.
Yeah.
So it's mad. It's
Agreed.
not just Corcel. It's market wide. There's so many anomalies out there. There's some companies have got more cash in their market cap, etc. But no, there's definitely an opportunity. So there is.
Well, a lot of turbulence in the markets, and we've all seen what's happened with the pound and gilts over the last couple of weeks. I mean, it's pretty crazy out there. Interest rates going up. Housing market being questioned. So yeah, no, I mean, we live in very interesting times. But I think our sort of overarching strategy to offer these the battery metal exposure as it is now evolving and developing, as I said earlier, remains a good one. So I would think, and I know hand on heart, I think Corcel is pretty much an upside only share at this point. I don't think there's a lot of downside in the equity. And I think the pieces are falling into place to take this forward in a very exciting way.
Definitely. No, it's good to see a couple of days of news. It just puts a different perspective and everything. And obviously, you've thrown rare earths into the mix, and don't forget you've still got your vanadium stuff as well.
Correct.
In North America. So there's a nice mix of commodities now. So there is definitely. Mark,
it's good. It's good to see this deal go through, Scott. I hope to see plenty of news flow and the progression of these assets, because we've heard for a while how valuable a prospective Mambare can be for sure. So doing this deal now with, as you say, the sort of the big boys, that's taken a while to get into place, can only be a good thing. And let's see how it develops. I mean, is there anything left to sort of finalize, to sort of close the deal? Any risks that could come into play, or is it pretty much there?
There's always a bit of risk, I guess, but I think nothing that we're particularly concerned about. We will need the jurisdictional approvals from the various governments in order to vend the assets into the vehicle. The vehicle's in the process of being set up. We do need our partner, who I mentioned earlier, who might ultimately join us in some form, to waive a right of first refusal, actually, so that needs to happen. But it's a funny one. We were discussing it internally. Obviously, the partner has a ROFA, but really can't offer us a Singapore listing and a lithium project, right? I mean, like it's sort of impossible to create an equivalent offer. So I don't think anybody's too concerned with the ROFA being exercised. So it's ultimately there's some paperwork to be done. There are a couple of jurisdictions involved. So we've got the UK, we've got Singapore, obviously, and PNG. So there's some legal bits. There will be some legal fees. I mean, it's the usual bits to kind of finish these things off. But everybody's hard at work on that, and more announcements will follow in due course as that all kind of comes together and gets finalized.
Okay.
Yep. Of course, and just a final thing from me, Scott. I mean, obviously we've had COVID, and then obviously we've had the market turmoil the last more than a year now. I mean, I suppose that the sort of cloud, or the silver lining in the cloud, is that it's forced companies to sort of streamline their activities, salaries and cutting costs, etc. And almost taking a good hard look at how much the company's spending every month. I assume that's still the case for you guys. You're trying to run everything as efficiently as possible.
Yes. No, I mean, we've been doing that for some time, but we've cut things further over the summer. I mean, obviously, we're just trying to be practical about things. At the end of the day, I mean, we run the office out of a WeWork. I mean, it's just one tiny little room. It was in the basement until very recently. Actually, they forced us to move. So, we do try to keep things quite inexpensive. And I think when it comes to being able to do things remotely, maybe travel's not quite as required. I mean, we probably do need to go. There is a plan to sit down probably in Korea with some of the NPC partners here, probably as part of the finalization. So that's probably going to be up and coming. But I don't think there's as much of a required requirement to travel to visit sites, and that actually has a meaningful cost over time. Unfortunately, things like insurance and some other things, I'm sure you guys have heard about. D&O insurance has gotten exceptionally expensive over the last couple of years, and brokers and nomads and things, and auditors, they're all kind of in the mix, right? I mean, these things don't go away for listed companies, but I think we're running a pretty lean ship at this point, and pretty much optimized for the way forward.
Yeah, that is good to hear. It's good to hear, given what's going on and the uncertainty of what might happen as we go into the winter. It seems like you've got that under control, Scott, from a cost point of view, and got this deal almost pretty much confirmed before anything does get worse. Hopefully it doesn't get too much worse, but nice to see it in place at this point in time. Well, I think that covers pretty much everything. I think, do you have any other points you wanted to get across, Scott, regarding this, or what do you think?
No, I hope that paints a bit more of a picture. I mean, I certainly recognize that this was a complicated RNS. We had a lot of feedback on that regard. I mean, people don't maybe understand. So I hope our kind of discussion today sets the sort of background a little bit, why we think it makes sense, and frankly, why we think it's a good deal. I mean, it'd be great to sell Mombare, and our WoWo Gap interests for 500 million or something. But I mean, let's be honest. I mean, we're a relatively small company at this point, and nobody's going to pay that. So, we think this is a good marriage. It's a good tie up, and we think it's going to, ultimately create quite a bit of value for Corcel. And as we've all just discussed, it also opens, I think, some kind of interesting opportunities with the UK listing and how we sort of take these things jointly forward. So yeah, we're pretty excited. I hope that comes through. I hope this kind of helps clarify. Obviously, we're always happy if people reach out with further questions. Now that COVID is over, we'd like to get back to doing a bit more in-person type stuff, where we can sit down and meet people. I know that largely went away during COVID. So it'd be good to be able to, to shake people's hands a little bit, just talk through things. And I think when people have the information and kind of understand where things are going and why, they'll be as excited as we are.
Good. Well, certainly events are starting to slowly happen again. Investor events, there was been at 2 this year. They've been quieter than the previous years, but they are coming back. So hopefully that only gets better, and hopefully, we can see you at one of them, Scott, and get around and meet some more people. But I think that covers everything today. So thank you very much for your time, Scott. Kenny, have you got any further points, or are you good?
No, I'm all good. I'm just about to get my swimming shorts out and jump into a hot tub.
You're on holiday, aren't you? You're going to jump in the hot tub when it's driving rain and freezing cold. Typical.
Yeah.
We'll have fun.
It's fine, man.
Sounds fun.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Scott, and we'll catch you later.
Okay, thank you for the time.
Thank you for listening to another podcast from Market Musings with Ben and Russell. Tune in next time.